Welcome to another presentation here on Bible Feud. Brother Stefan here. Happy to have you all joining me tonight. Those of you who are watching both from Facebook and YouTube, again, do me a big favor and like, share, subscribe, comment, stay engaged, bring people to this conversation as we get started tonight to continue our series. This will be the second and final part of this series, as we are addressing Old Testament scriptures that have been traditionally applied and associated to the devil. So we're just looking at these passages with fresh eyes, and we're looking at them in their context to see if these things are so. So please subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. If you haven't already, share the link with somebody. Hey, Stefan is on. He's talking about these Old Testament passages. Bring people to the conversation so that we can educate and edify and build and learn and grow together. All right. So if you'd be so kind, I would love for you to do that for me right on Bible Fuel. All right. So tonight we're going to pick it back up. We're going to go into Isaiah chapter 14. And yesterday I had a great time unpacking Ezekiel chapter 28. As we looked at the passage in Ezekiel where it talks about the anointed cherub that covered, who had been in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone was his covering. We looked at that and we saw how that applied to the king of Tyrus. And so today we're going to look at another passage that people have quickly associated with the devil. But we're going to look at it to see how it applies to Babylon. All right. So again, as I said yesterday, my goal is not to discourage you from believing that these passages are talking about the devil. My goal is to show you how they apply to the men and the kingdom that's in question. All right. So yesterday, for example, Ezekiel 28, and if you haven't seen it, it is part 1. It's available for you to watch on YouTube. So take a look at that if you haven't already. But we looked at how that applies to the king of Tyrus, the actual human king of Tyrus and his community. And today we're going to look at Isaiah 14 and see how that applies to the king of Babylon and the Babylonian people. All right. So we're going to do a verse by verse Bible study. Here's the main verse that folks are attributing to the devil. This is Isaiah chapter 14, verse 12, which reads, "How are you fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How you are cut down to the ground, you who weakened the nations." And so what we have been traditionally sort of coached to believe when we read this text is that this is giving you some insight into the background of the devil. And so this is supposed to be telling us that the devil was in heaven and then he fell. Which I'm not disputing. I'm not disputing that the devil was once an angel in heaven. I'm not disputing that. What I am simply what I want you to consider is this passage communicating that, right? And so in any case, my goal is not to prove to you that it's not talking about the devil, but it's to show you how this is talking about Babylon. How can we talk about Babylon and call Babylon Lucifer? And we're going to define what Lucifer means, and this will become clear. So in order to understand Isaiah 14, I want to start at chapter 13. We're going to do a verse-by-verse study just so we can get the context. And then from there, we're going to explain how this is referring to Babylon. All right? And then again, if you want to say that this is applying to the devil, that's your prerogative. It's up to you to make that determination. I think we give the devil a little too much credit, but you may have a different persuasion on that. So we're going to start with Isaiah 13. We're going to just go verse by verse. We're going to read the context. Feel free to weigh in the comment section if you have any questions or comments. You can leave those in the comment section, and we will talk about that as we go along. All right? Cool. So let's start. Isaiah chapter 13, starting at verse 1. The burden against Babylon, which Isaiah, the son of Amos, saw. Lift up a banner on the high mountain, raise your voice to them, wave your hand, raise your hand that they may enter the gates of the nobles. I have commanded my sanctified ones. I have also called my mighty ones for my anger, those who rejoice in my exaltation. Now notice verse 1, it says, the burden against Babylon. Verse 4, the noise of the multitude in the mountains, like that of many people, a tumultuous noise of the kingdoms of nations gathered together. The Lord of hosts musters the army for battle. They come from a far country, from the end of heaven, the Lord and his weapons of indignation to destroy the whole land. Wail, for the day of the Lord is at hand. Therefore, all hands will be limp, every man's heart will melt, and they will be afraid. Pangs and sorrows will take hold of them. They will be in pain as a woman in childbirth. They will be amazed at one another. Their faces will be like flames. Behold, the day of the Lord comes, cruel with both wrath and fierce anger, to lay the land desolate, and he will destroy its sinners from it. Now, a lot of people may read this and they may apply this to the end times, which I'm not saying that that's a wrong approach to do, but we certainly can retain from verse 1 that this is referring to Babylon. This is the burden against Babylon. God is telling Babylon that he's going to destroy them, right? This is what this is about. Let's continue. For the stars of heaven and their constellations will not give their light. The sun will be darkened in its going forth, and the moon will not cause its light to shine. I will punish the world of its evil and the wicked for their iniquity. I will halt the arrogance of the proud and will lay low the haughtiness of the terrible. I will make a mortal more rare than fine gold, a man more than the gold wedge of Ophir. Right? Therefore, I will shake the heavens, and the earth will move out of her place in the wrath of the Lord of hosts, and in the day of his fierce anger. It shall be as the hunted gazelle, the hunted gazelle, and as a sheep that no man takes up. Every man will turn to his own people, and everyone will flee to his own land. Everyone who is found will be thrust through. Now, this is very important as we transition into verse 16. Now we're going to begin to really emphasize the context here. All right. Their children also will be dashed to pieces before their eyes. Their houses will be plundered and their wives ravished. And look at what it says here. Behold, I will stir up the Medes against them, who will not regard silver, and as for gold, they will not delight in it. Also, their bows will dash the young men to pieces, and they will have no pity on the fruit of the womb. Their eye will not spare children. What are we reading? This is a proclamation against the kingdom of Babylon. God is telling Babylon, as you can see in verse 17, I'm going to stir up the Medes against you. In other words, the kingdom of Media, which we'll talk about more as this presentation goes on, the kingdom of Media actually took the kingdom away from Babylon. They put an end to the Babylonian captivity. And this is what God is prophesying. So he's going to use the nation of the Medes to actually put an end to the Babylonian captivity. And we read about that in Daniel, and we'll capture some of that. So that's an important thing to note, because this whole context is still talking about Babylon. Starting at verse 1, all the way up to this point, it's talking about Babylon. Here's an example of this, right? If we go to Jeremiah chapter 51, and we'll come back to Isaiah, look at what he says in Jeremiah 51, as Jeremiah also prophesies of the destruction of Babylon. Verse 11, make the arrows bright, gather the shields. The Lord has raised up the spirit of the kings of the Medes, for his plan is against Babylon to destroy it. Because it is the vengeance of the Lord, the vengeance for his temple. Prepare against, verse 28, prepare against her the nations. So prepare against Babylon. Prepare against her the nations with kings of the Medes, its governors and all its rulers, all the land of his dominion. So this is more prophecy about how God is going to use the Media empire, the Media kingdom, to destroy Babylon. right? And then let's look at this again. So we go back to Isaiah, we'll see this again. Behold, Isaiah 13, I stir up the Medes against them. It's talking about Babylon. He's using the Media empire to destroy Babylon. We find this in Daniel, where the last king in Babylon is Belshazzar, who's the grandson of King Nebuchadnezzar. And look at what he says. And Belshazzar, if you read Daniel chapter 5, he sees a vision. He's the last king of Babylon. He sees this vision, and Daniel interprets the vision for him. It's actually more so writing on the wall. Daniel interprets it for him. He says, this is the interpretation of each word. Mene, God has numbered your kingdom and finished it. See, Babylon, God has numbered your kingdom and he's finished it. Tekel, you have been weighed in the balances and found wanting. You're lacking some stuff. And then Perez, your kingdom has been divided and given to the Medes and Persians. That very night, Belshazzar, king of the Chaldeans, those are the people of Babylon, he was slain, and Darius the Mede received the kingdom, being about 62 years old. So it is true that Isaiah chapter 13 is talking about the destruction of Babylon by the hands of the Medes, right? And so the context is about Babylon, and that's important to capture. Behold, I will stir up the Medes against them. Let's continue. Isaiah 13, verse 19. He says, in Babylon, the glory of kingdoms, the beauty of the Chaldeans pride will be as when God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. It will never be inhabited, nor will it be settled from generation to generation. Nor will the Arabian pitch tents there, nor will there be shepherds, nor will the shepherds make their sheepfolds there. And as we wrap up in this chapter, but the wild beasts of the desert will lie there, and their houses will be full of owls. Ostriches will dwell there, and wild goats will caper there. The hyenas will howl in their citadels, and jackals in their pleasant palaces. Her time is near to come, and her days will not be prolonged. This is talking about Babylon. I'm getting ready, Babylon, to put an end to your glorious kingdom. And let me tell you something. Babylon was perhaps arguably the most powerful kingdom that has ever existed in our realm. It's arguably the most powerful kingdom. Let me tell you something. Babylon ruled the entire earth. There's not a place in the earth that was not under the leadership of Babylon. This was what you call a one world government. All right. By the time Nebuchadnezzar came on the scene, every nation under the earth had to be under his leadership. And guess who made it that way? God did. Daniel tells us in the book of Daniel, chapter 2 or 4, he says, God sets up the kings and puts them down. And it was God's desire, it was his will to make King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon king over the whole earth, right? And keep that in mind, because that's gonna be some necessary information for us. So we just read chapter 13. We got some context, and if we go back to the verse 1 in Isaiah 13, it says the burden against Babylon. So we gotta keep that in mind as we approach Isaiah 14. Now, here in Isaiah 14, we're gonna unpack what it means when the scripture when it says Lucifer. This is where we're gonna get into that, because that's mentioned here in the 14th chapter. And I want you to really lean into the context and the content that I'm getting ready to show you, because I think it's going to be helpful as we unpack what is meant by Lucifer. So here's Isaiah 14. Let's do this verse by verse. For the Lord will have mercy on Jacob and will still choose Israel and settle them in their own land. The strangers will be joined with them, and they will cling to the house of Jacob. Then people will take them and bring them to their place, and the house of Israel will possess them for servants and maids in the land of the Lord. They will take them captive, whose captives they were, and rule over their oppressors. Now, what is this talking about? This is talking about the people of Jerusalem going back into their land after being in captivity by the Babylonians for 70 years. That's what that's dealing with. This is not necessarily a future thing. This is something that was present. So let's get into it. Verse 3-6. It shall come to pass in the day the Lord gives you rest from your sorrow and from your fear and from the hard bondage in which you were made to serve. That's talking about Jerusalem, the people of Jerusalem. Look at what he says in verse 4. That you will take up this proverb against the king of Babylon. So everything that God is getting ready to say, based on verse 4, is to the king of Babylon. Let's not let that slip. Take up this proverb against the king of Babylon and say, how the oppressor has ceased, the golden city has ceased. So Babylon is being referred to as the oppressor. The Lord has broken the staff of the wicked, the scepter of the rulers. He who struck the people in wrath with a continual stroke, he who ruled the nations in anger is persecuted and no one hinders. Wait a minute. I want you to keep this in mind now. Keep this in mind. He who ruled the nations. Who is this talking about? Well, verse 4 tells you it's talking about the king of Babylon. He ruled the nations. All the nations under the earth was under the leadership and command of the king of Babylon. I want to drill this in your head right now. He who ruled the nations. Do not let that slip. Don't forget that. That's going to be very important. Because when we get to verse 4, when we get down to verse 12, where it talks about Lucifer falling from heaven, you got to keep this in mind. He who ruled the nations. That's going to come back up. Look at this here. The whole earth is at rest and quiet. They break forth into singing. Indeed, the cypress trees rejoice over you, and the cedars of Lebanon, saying, since you were cut down, no woodsman has come up against us. This is parabolic language saying that the nations are going to be happy when the kingdom of Babylon is broken down, because they're going to say the earth is at rest now. You know, we don't got to worry about Babylon coming and try to destroy our nations, because that's what he did. He also was king of Babylon, put fear in the other nations. Now, verse 9, let's see. Hell from beneath is excited about you to meet you at your coming. It stirs up the dead for you, all the chief ones of the earth. It has raised up from their thrones all the kings of the nations. Now, they say, well, since it says hell from beneath is excited about you, it got to be talking about the devil. Just got to be. Why? Is hell only for the devil? No. And we're getting ready to show you that men have been going to this place called hell for quite some time. But notice what the verse says itself. It says, hell from beneath is excited about you to meet you at your coming. It stirs up the dead for you, all the chief ones of the earth. So the chief ones of the earth, they are in hell waiting for the king of Babylon to come and meet them there. It has raised up from their thrones all the kings of the nations. So the kings of the nations who have died and went into hell, this says that they're waiting on you to give you a little welcoming party when you get there. It says hell is excited to meet you at your coming. They're waiting on you. All the other kings, all the other chief ones of the earth, they'll be there when you get there. And they're going to lay out the red carpet. They can't wait to meet you. This is what God is saying to the king of Babylon. And when he gets to hell and they meet him in hell, they shall speak and say to him, have you also become as weak as we? Have you become like us? Your pomp is brought down to Sheol, and the sound of your stringed instruments. The maggot is spread under you, and worms cover you. Now, this is what they're going to say to the king when he gets to hell. When he comes down there, wait a minute. Is this the one that was putting fear in all the nations and who ruled over us? He down here with us. See, because the king of Babylon, I want to say Nebuchadnezzar because that's ultimately, uh, that's that's the one king of Babylon that God used, unlike any other king of Babylon. And so I keep naturally wanting to say Nebuchadnezzar, which wouldn't be wrong. But my point is, they said, this king, did you just become like us? Now, this is what they're going to say when he gets there and to meet them in hell. They're going to be a little surprised, like, whoa, you supposed to be the man. I thought you was a god. You know, what you doing down here with us common folk? And so this is not about, I mean, that's just what the context is about. Let's keep reading. Now, I'm going to show you a few passages about hell, about Sheol, that proves that people are there. Humans are actually there, right? So let's look at some things about Sheol real quick. Isaiah chapter 5, look at this. Therefore, my people have gone into captivity because they have no knowledge. Their honorable men are famished, and their multitude dried up with thirst. Verse 14, look at it. Therefore, Sheol has enlarged itself and opened its mouth beyond measure. Their glory and their multitudes and their pomp, and he who is jubilant shall descend into it. This is a statement about humans. This is a statement about humans, right? Look at what it says. It says, therefore my people have gone into captivity because they have no knowledge. Their honorable men are famished, and their multitude dried up with thirst. Therefore, Sheol has enlarged itself and opened its mouth beyond measure to receive the people, their glory and their multitude and their pomp, and he who is jubilant shall descend into Sheol. Look at what it says. People, verse 15, people shall be brought down. Each man shall be humbled, and the eyes of the lofty shall be humbled. So this is just a passage about humans going into Sheol. Here's another passage. This is talking about the king of Tyrus. And look at what it says. Then I will bring you down with those who descend in the pit. See, I'm going to bring you with those who are already in the pit. Look at what he says. To the people of old. So there are people who have been in this pit known as Sheol, which we say is hell, right? People have already been there. And so for God to tell Nebuchadnezzar, or the king of Babylon, I'm going to bring you down to the pit. I'm going to bring you down. Your pomp is going to lead you to hell. That doesn't have to be talking about the devil, because men are going into the pit every day. And he tells the king of Tyrus, he says, I will bring you down with those who descend into the pit, to the people of old, and I will make you dwell in the lowest parts of the earth, in places desolate from antiquity. And those who go down to the pit, so that you may never be inhabited, and I will establish glory in the land of living. So I just want to show you this, right? I think I have one more. Here we go. Revelation 20:13. When it comes time for judgment, the dead going to have to come up out of Sheol. It said the sea gave up the dead who were in it, and death and Hades delivered up the dead who were in them. Now, Hades is synonymous with Sheol. It's referring to hell. And so at the great white throne of judgment, as recorded in Revelation 20, those who are dead in Sheol, they're going to come out of Sheol to be judged. And guess who's there? The king of Babylon is there. The king of Tyrus is there. And people of like behavior and like similar situations, they are in Sheol. And this is where God is taking the king of Babylon. He's taking them where other people have already been. And so that's why he says, your pomp in Isaiah 14 has brought you down to Sheol. All right. Y'all ready to get to the money? This is the verse you've all been waiting for. You've come for this verse right here. I'm going to explain to you what it means for the king of Babylon to be called Lucifer. Let's get it. Isaiah chapter 14, verse 12. How are you fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How are you cut down to the ground, you who weakened the nations? For you have said in your heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will also sit on the mount of the congregation on the farthest sides of the north. Now, we've all heard the stories. Well, the devil, he was in heaven. He was a great musician. He had pipes in him, and he was decorated with fashion with all kind of precious stones. And his beauty caused him to be arrogant, and he decided that he wanted to overthrow God and kill God. Where'd you get that from? I got it from Isaiah 14. Well, Isaiah 14 don't say none of that, if we're being honest. So when it says, how are you fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, this is supposed to be telling us that the devil got, he wanted to have all the authority in heaven, so then God kicked him out. Well, we just don't read that here, right? In order to get that from this text, you got to bring it to the text. You have to impose and presuppose. But if we read it for what it is, the context has never changed from the king of Babylon. So it is the king of Babylon who is being referred to as Lucifer. And Lucifer in and of itself doesn't mean anything demonic. It doesn't mean anything evil. It doesn't mean devil. It doesn't mean Satan. We're going to unpack that. So it is the king of Babylon who said, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will also sit on the mountain of the congregation. This is the king of Babylon. So let's unpack this Lucifer situation. Here's what tradition has taught us. Lucifer is the devil. So when we go to Isaiah 14 and we see Lucifer, we say that's the devil when he was in heaven as an angel. But that's not true based on the context. Now, I will tell you this. Lucifer is only written in the King James version, which is fine. Nothing's wrong with that, with the term Lucifer in that being in the version. And then the New King James also says Lucifer. If you look up this verse, if you look up Isaiah 14:12 in any other translation, more than likely it's going to say morning star or day star or shining one, something like that. So instead of saying Lucifer, it will say star of the morning, So Lucifer does not mean devil. All right. Let's just clear that up. That's not what it means. Okay. Here's what it means. It is in the Hebrew, it is Hallel, which means the morning star. So Lucifer simply means the morning star, and Lucifer is Latin. So it comes from the Latin, not from the Hebrew, which is not really important, but Lucifer means morning star. Why is Babylon called the morning star? I'm going to show you why. Babylon is called the morning star because he ruled all the nations. Remember, I told you earlier to keep in mind that he ruled all the nations. That's why God is calling him the morning star. And I'm going to prove to you that this is what the morning star means. It means the one who rules all nations. So I'm going to show you that that's what it means, and I'm going to show you why that could be said of the king of Babylon. Are you ready? All right, let's go to work. Revelation chapter 2, verse 26 through 28. Look at what Jesus says to the people. And he who overcomes and keeps my works unto the end, to him I will give power over the nations. He shall rule them with the rod of iron. They shall be dashed to pieces like the potter's vessels, as I also have received from my Father. And I will give them the what? I will give him the what? The morning star. I'll give him the morning star. What is Jesus saying? How is Jesus using the language morning star? He's using it as one who rules all nations. So he's saying in this particular context in Revelation 2 to the church at Thyatira, he's saying, if you overcome, I'm going to give you the morning star to rule all nations. Let's look at it again. And he who overcomes and keeps my works unto the end, to him I will give power over the nations. He shall rule them with a rod of iron. They shall be dashed to pieces like the potter's vessels, as I also have received from my Father. So what did Jesus receive from his Father? Power over all nations, to rule all nations. And verse 27 is a quote. It's a referencing from Psalm chapter 2, where God is talking about how his son is going to rule all nations. Well, Jesus is saying, well, if you overcome, just like my Father gave me the power to rule all nations, I'm going to give you the same morning star. I'm going to give it to you. And that's what it means to be the morning star. And this is why Jesus is referred to in Revelation 22 as the root and offspring of David, the bright and morning star. He's called the bright and morning star because he's the ruler of all nations. But while as he's the ruler of all nations, he's saying here in Revelation 2, whoever overcomes, verse 26, I'll give you power over all nations. I'll give you the morning star. And this is what it means to be the morning star. This is what it means to be Lucifer. It doesn't mean that you're the devil. It means you're the ruler of all nations. And this is why Jesus is called the morning star, the bright and morning star. And so let's see if this checks out, right? So what I'm suggesting to you all is that Babylon is the morning star because they ruled all nations. I then show you the application of what it means to be morning star, which this is the only application you'll find in the Bible. You could go on Google and YouTube and try to figure it out, but just come right here to Revelation. It makes it very clear. To have the morning star is to rule all nations. So let's see if Babylon qualifies as ruling all nations. Let's see what the Bible has to say. Let's look at this. Jeremiah chapter 27, verses 6 through 7. And now I have given all these lands into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, my servant, and the beast of the field I have also given him to serve him. So all nations shall serve him and his sons and his son's son until the time of his land comes. Do you see that? All nations had to serve Babylon. All nations had to serve King Nebuchadnezzar. And not just him, but his son and his son's son. And that would be Belshazzar, his grandson, who was the last king of Babylon before the Medes came in and took the kingdom. So do you see this? Do you see why God is calling Babylon Lucifer? Why he's calling them the morning star? It's because they ruled all nations. This is how Jesus uses the term. He said, whoever overcomes, I'll give you power over all the nations. I'll give you the morning star. That's the morning star is the power over all nations. It's the brightest star in the sky. It shines above every other star. That's the morning star. Excuse me, my phone is ringing. And does Babylon meet that? Yes. He ruled all nations, the king of Babylon. Here's look at what God says. So he says that all nations shall serve him and his son and his son's son until the time of his land has come. And then many nations and great kings shall make him serve them. So they're saying, well, Babylon's time is going to come. But look at what God says. If you don't serve Babylon, this is what God says. And it shall be that the nation and kingdom which shall not serve Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, and which will not put its neck under the yoke of the king of Babylon, that nation I will punish. God is the one who made Babylon the headquarters, the head kingdom in the world. This is why Nebuchadnezzar is called King of Kings, because he's above every king in the earth. And God said, if your nation don't serve Babylon, I'm going to punish you. You have to serve Babylon. This is what God, Nebuchadnezzar didn't steal the kingdoms. God put him over them. He put all the kingdoms under the feet of Nebuchadnezzar. This is why Nebuchadnezzar is called Lucifer. This is why the king of Babylon is called Lucifer, because he's the morning star, the ruler of all nations. That's what morning star refers to. Right? Oh, this is good. So look at what God tells him, right? Nebuchadnezzar has a dream, and Daniel interprets the dream for him. And this is what Daniel says. Nebuchadnezzar had a dream of a golden statue, basically. It was a head of gold and a chest of silver and a abdomen of a stomach area of bronze and then legs of iron. And Daniel comes to interpret the dream for him. And look at what Daniel says. Daniel chapter 2, verse 36 to 38. This is the dream. Now we will tell the interpretation of it before the king. You, O king, are a king of kings. For the God of heaven has given you a kingdom, power, strength, and glory. God gave the king of Babylon a kingdom. And this kingdom was the whole earth. Look what he says in verse 38. And whenever the children of men dwell, wherever the children of men dwell, or beasts of the field and the birds of the heaven, he has given them into your hand and has made you ruler over them all. You are this head of gold, king of Babylon. God has given you to rule over all the nations. This is what makes the king of Babylon Lucifer, the morning star. This is not referring to the devil. When was the devil over all the nations? There's no biblical evidence of that. Amen. Now, let's keep it moving. So now we have a little better understanding of what it means to be Lucifer or the morning star. How are you fallen from heaven, O morning star, O day star, O Lucifer, son of the morning? The son of the morning, the star that shines the brightest in the morning above the brightness of every other star, that is the day star. Son of the morning, son of the dawn. That's the day star. That's the morning star. That is the Lucifer. Lucifer is not referring to the devil, at least not in this context, and we just proved that. Now, again, I'm not here to force you to detach this context from the devil. I'm not here to force you to do that, but I want you to consider how it applies to Babylon. For you have said in your heart, I will ascend into heaven. Well, if the devil is already in heaven, why does he need to ascend there? This is Nebuchadnezzar. This is the king of Babylon. I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will also sit on. Why did he say you fell from heaven? Because Babylon, their kingdom had become so great that its greatness reached all the way to heaven, and God cut them down. So they fell from heaven. Let's prove it. Daniel chapter 4. Here's another vision that Nebuchadnezzar sees. He sees this tree that grows and grows and grows, and it doesn't stop growing, and it reaches all the way up into heaven. Nebuchadnezzar sees this vision, and guess who the tree is? It represents him and his kingdom. Daniel is going to help interpret the dream for us in Daniel 4. The tree that you saw, which grew and became strong, whose height reached to the heavens, and which could be seen by all the earth, whose leaves were lovely, and its fruit abundant, and in which was food for all, under which the beasts of the field dwelt, and in whose branches the birds of the heaven had their home. This tree, verse 22, it is you, O king. It is you who have grown and become strong, for your greatness has grown and reaches to the heavens, and your dominion to the ends of the earth. Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, his kingdom had grown so much that it in a parabolic sense, it grew and reached all the way up to heaven. This is why it says, how are you fallen from heaven, O Lucifer? Because the king of Babylon fell from heaven, not in a literal sense, but in a sense of authority and dominion. That's what he says. Look at it. Verse 22. It is you, O king, who have grown and become strong, for your greatness has grown and reaches to the heavens, and your dominion to the ends of the earth. Look at what he says. Inasmuch as the king saw a watcher, a holy one, coming down from heaven and saying, chop down the tree. And that's why it says that you fell from heaven, because your greatness reached to heaven, and then your tree was chopped down and fell from heaven. Right? Let's look at this in Jeremiah. Jeremiah 51, verse 7 through 8. Babylon was a golden cup in the Lord's hand that made all the earth drunk. The nations drank her wine, therefore the nations are deranged. Why did the nations drink the wine of Babylon? Because Babylon ruled the nations. Look at verse 8. Babylon has suddenly fallen and been destroyed. How are you fallen from heaven, O Lucifer? Babylon has suddenly fallen. What did they fall from? They fell from heaven. Not literally. Not literally. The king of Babylon wasn't literally in heaven. And neither is Isaiah trying to say he was. This is parabolic language describing the greatness of the king of Babylon and the kingdom of Babylon. Babylon has suddenly fallen and been destroyed. Well for her. Take balm for her pain. Perhaps she may be healed. Let's go to, stay in Jeremiah 51. Let's jump down to verse 53 through 55. Though Babylon were to mount up to where? Talk to me now, church. Though Babylon were to mount up to heaven. See? This is talking about Babylon fell from heaven. Not literally, but again, it's expressing the greatness of the kingdom of Babylon. Its greatness reached all the way up to heaven. Though Babylon were to mount up to heaven, and though she were to fortify the height of her strength, yet from me plunders would come to her, says the Lord. So even if Babylon made it up to heaven, I'm going to plunder them down. Verse 54, the sound of a cry comes from Babylon, and great destruction from the land of the Chaldeans. Because the Lord is plundering Babylon and silencing her loud voice, though her waves roar like a great waters, and the noise of their voices uttered. See? It's Babylon that had reached into heaven and was fallen from heaven, O Lucifer. Lucifer is referring to Babylon as the ruler of all nations. So now we fully understand what it means for the king of Babylon to have fallen from heaven, O Lucifer. Because you were a great kingdom, you ruled all nations, but your kingdom is coming down. And that's all Isaiah is saying in Isaiah chapter 12. It doesn't talk about the devil being in heaven as the choir master. Come on, somebody. It don't say that. Tyler B. number 2 says, Peter was called Satan. That's true. Jesus called Peter Satan. But I don't see Satan mentioned in Isaiah 14, verse 12. You see, Lucifer is not Satan. Lucifer just means day star, and day star refers to the one that rules all nations. The morning star, ruler of all nations. All right. So Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, the king of Babylon, said, I will ascend into heaven, exalt my throne. No evidence that the devil said that. Look what he says. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. Now, he didn't say I want to kill the Most High. I want to kill God. He didn't say he wanted to kill him. He just said I want to be like him. Well, the devil, he got the other angels. They went into a little secret room and they came up with this plan to kill God and take over heaven and take over the world. Well, no, they don't say that. You got to presuppose and impose. You see, now when we was kids, that was cute. But see, some of us grown. And when you grown in the faith, you got to start doing some reading for yourself. It don't make no sense for you to keep going around telling people that story if you can't read it in your own Bible. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. He didn't say you want to kill him. I want to be just like God. Unfortunately, though, King of Babylon didn't have the right heart. And look at what God says. Yet you shall be brought down to Sheol. You ain't coming up here. You going down there. Where? To the lowest depths of the pit. Come on, somebody. You thought you was going to send all the way up there, all the way up here in the heaven, but I'm going to put you down there with the lower parts of the earth, to the lower parts. You're going down to Sheol, where the rest of your king buddies were, who tried that same thing, who had that same heart. You're going to go down there with them, and when they see you down there in Sheol, they're going to look at you and say, is this the one that weakened the nations? Why? Because Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon weakened the nations. He had a yoke of bondage around the nations. And the kings who died before him, who went down into Sheol first, when they see him there, they're going to wonder, man, I thought you was the man. How you end up down here with us? Right? Well, this is how we know we're talking about a man. Look at it. He says, those who see you will gaze at you. Now, this is going to be in Sheol. When you get to Sheol, when you get to hell, those who see you will gaze at you and consider you, saying, is this the spirit, the angel, the devil? No. Is this the man who made the whole earth tremble, who shook kingdoms, who made the world as a wilderness and destroyed its cities, who did not open the house of his prisoners? Is this the king of Babylon, who put fear in the whole earth, who put fear in all the kingdoms of the earth, who destroyed the cities of other nations and people? Is this him down here in Sheol with us? Is this the man? Not this ain't talking about the devil. This is talking about the man, the king of Babylon. Amen. Is that in your Bible? Those who see you will gaze and consider you, saying, is this the man who made the whole earth tremble? All the kings of the nations, all of them, sleep in glory, everyone in his own house. But you are cast out of your grave like an abominable branch, like a garment of those who are slain, thrust through with a sword, who go down to the stones of the pit like a corpse trodden underfoot. Because he says, you will not be joined with them in burial, because you have destroyed your land and slain your people. He didn't say you slew your other angels. You slew your people, your human people. The brood of evildoers shall never be named. Prepare slaughter for the children because of the iniquity of their fathers, lest they rise up and possess the land and fill the face of the world of the cities. Look at what he says as we wrap up. Verse 22, for I will rise up against them, says the Lord of hosts, and cut off from Babylon the name and remnant and offspring and so listen, you all, look at what he's saying. I'm going to cut Babylon off. I'm going to cut them off. I'm going to cut their offspring off. I'm going to cut off the remnant. He says, I will also make it a possession for the porcupine and marshes of muddy water. I will sweep it with the broom of destruction, says the Lord of hosts. I'm going to sweep it clean. It's going to be Babylon without a trace. Let me see if I'm done. That's it. We've just decoded Ezekiel 28 and Isaiah 14, which didn't have to be decoded in the first place because they were already clear. They're clearly talking about the kings of Babylon and the kings of Tyrus, the king of Tyrus. When he said you fell from heaven, O Lucifer, He's not talking about an angel that came down. And Lucifer doesn't mean angel. Lucifer doesn't mean devil. Lucifer means morning star. And we looked at the application of morning star in the book of Revelation. It means to rule all nations. Jesus says, and he who overcomes and keeps my works until the end, to him I will give power over the nations. And he quotes Psalms 2 about himself. He shall rule them with a rod of iron. They shall be dashed to pieces like the potter's vessels. And then Jesus says, as I also have received from my Father. What did Jesus receive from his Father? Power over the nations. He says, and just like that, I'm going to give you the morning star as well. And that's what it means to be the morning star. And that's what he means when he says, how have you fallen from heaven, O Lucifer? Because Nebuchadnezzar was over all the kings of the earth. Look at this, Jeremiah 27:7. All nations shall serve him. All nations. Babylon was over all nations. Come on, y'all, that's good. Any questions or comments before I sign off? Any questions or comments about this lesson? I see a couple people are watching, so feel free to ask any question you may have. Amen. Hopefully you all understood and enjoyed and followed along, and you understand what makes King of Babylon the morning star. This is the morning star right here. If you can see this graphic, right? The morning star, look, you see how you got all these other stars? But the day star, the morning star, the son of the morning, shines brighter than the rest of them. This represents the leader of all the nations. That's what it means to be the morning star. It doesn't mean that you're a demonic, prideful devil. That's not what it means. Now, notice we studied in context. We studied just in Isaiah, right? And then we looked at clearly related passages in Jeremiah to help us understand this. So if there are no questions, then I thank you for your time. No questions? Do me a favor, would you? Subscribe, like, share, comment, right? Bring people to this video. If you have questions and you watch after it's streamed live, then please feel free to put your questions in the comment section. You can also send an email to me at BibleFuel238@gmail.com. And you can find it on the about section as well on Bible Fuel on the YouTube channel. So no questions before I go. So we explained what Lucifer means. It means morning star. Morning star. Which means the ruler of all nations. That's what it means to be the morning star. That's why Jesus says in Revelation, I am the bright and morning star. I'm the ruler of all nations. This is what he's saying. Come on, somebody. Good teaching. Fine teaching. All right. Thank you very much. I look forward to that concludes this series on Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel 28. Again, if you haven't watched part 1, it's available. Ezekiel chapter 28 is available as part 1. This will be a 2-part series, which is concluded now. So thank you all for watching, and hopefully you've learned a ton from these 2 studies. And I look forward to seeing you all next time. And again, remember to tell your friends about us, all right? Thank you all, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Peace.